well as neighborhood or neighbor notification through mailings.
Well, I believe discussions could be added, and also, I gave you that 5 days notice because I asked for it at the last meeting.
I'd call the question or call to have the motion.
May I have a brief 2-minute recess just so that I can look this up in the charter, and I will clarify if I'm incorrect.
We got to call the question here. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
All right. Questions called. We'll vote on the amendment. The amendment being that we are going to amend the bylaws in the future. One final comment from me is I would like to maybe address a study session with the board to determine what those bylaws need to be. With that, I think we will vote on whether or not we want to amend the bylaws to include a public comments before the meeting and the ability to amend and to approve the minutes. With that, all in favor? All. We're voting on the two.
You have a motion and a second to add a section to approve the agenda at each one and add a public comment section.
Yes. That was our motion.
Chairman, I would proffer that because there was not public notice given, that we can't even vote on whether or not to add the
Make a motion to
approval.
postpone this till the next meeting.
All right. Second on the postponement. All right. Hearing no second, that fails. The motion on the floor is to amend the bylaws, which we do not believe is a appropriate path forward in the bylaws. I'm going to seek Mr. Worsham's opinion on that.
Would you state that again, please, Mr. Swear?
We have a motion on the floor to amend the bylaws, but per our bylaws, we can't amend the bylaws without a 5-day notice.
Yes.
So how do we handle that from the standpoint of voting?
Well, I don't think the motion's appropriate because we haven't published the 5 days notice. Even though it was brought up at the last meeting, if the notice wasn't published the appropriate way, then we haven't accomplished that.
Thank you.
Sir, if I may.
Yes.
This is kind of getting a little bit too complicated. You can certainly make a motion to direct staff to draft an amendment to the bylaws, adding a section in the order of business for a meeting to add a section for public comment. And then I would present those amended bylaws to you at your December meeting.
Thank you. I
With
think
due
that's-
notice.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Hearing that the current motion on the floor is in violation of our bylaws, it fails on principle. Yes.
Not to be a pain, if nobody else has objection, I would ask the board to consider moving item 6B up above 6A, just because I have a feeling 6A is going to be a little lengthier discussion than 6B.
I'll second that. Very.
Just out of courtesy for,
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All approved. Aye. All opposed? All right. All right. We're going to handle 6B before 6A. All right. Moving on. We'll move on to reports from officers and staff. Ms. Samaniego.
Thank you. A few things. One, I'm just to announce that 2 weeks ago, I went to the Tennessee American Planning Association conference in Knoxville for a 3-day conference. I attended a lot of work sessions and study sessions and seminars, so it was very beneficial to me to attend that, so thank you. I had asked, item number 2, I had asked all of you to, prior to today's meeting, to re-review the 2011 comprehensive plan, since that's the current plan that we're operating under. I know there's been a lot of talk about the 2040 plan, but I wanted to make sure that you all kind of refreshed yourself on the 2011 plan, which is what we're operating under. So does anybody have any questions or comments on that? No. Okay. Moving on. A couple of citizens through all of this comprehensive planning discussion that we've been having the last year and a half, and all the public meetings we've been having and public comment. A couple citizens have kind of bubbled up to the surface that have taken the opportunity to come see me directly about some of their concerns and questions that they had about possible changes to the plan and/or the codes. So the first one is a Mr. Carrero. He is proposing, and he's here today if you want to speak with him, to, once we do re-review the 2040 plan, to establish a rural residential land use category or place type, which has that 2-acre minimum lot size, in a section of town that is around Avoca Lake Road. So because, kind of alluding to how we operate business, to what Alderman Amacher said, because we don't have public comment, typically residents bring their concerns and questions and emails to me, and then I forward them on to the Planning Commission. In this instance, I'm forwarding it on to you at the meeting. So when we review the updated 2011 plan and the 2040 plan, which would now be called the 2025 plan, which I'll get to later in the agenda, I'll certainly make this available for consideration with that, during that process. The second thing that I will hand out to you is something that you would have to direct staff to propose a text amendment. This is from Marvin Sellers. He is and he's here tonight, he is a member of the, I believe, the original Save Tullahoma group. He took the opportunity to come and talk to me several times and talk about the issues that he and some of the neighbors had, and said, what can we do within the process, within the law? So he is proposing, which I'll give to you, changes to the subdivision regulations, which the Planning Commissions can certainly consider. For one, creating a standard in the subdivision regulations where no new subdivision can have more than 30 lots accessing through an existing neighborhood. And then the second amendment to the subdivision regulations would say that when a new subdivision comes in, it has to, the bordering lots have to match or be comparable to the adjoining lots of established neighborhoods. So if the subdivision came in and the adjoining lots of Mary Acres had 1-acre lots, then those adjoining lots would be about 1 acre, and then they could bump down to the minimum lot size of the zoning district, 1 lot in. So these are certainly two things that could be amended within your subdivision regulations. I'll hand you the proposed language, and then you would just make a motion and a second to direct staff to start drafting those revisions for your ultimate consideration. And lastly, it's Thanksgiving week. I hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving, and if people are traveling, I hope you travel safely. That's all I have today.
Mary, I'm sorry, what was that last part? I had paper.
That it's Thanksgiving, and that if you're traveling, I hope you travel safe and enjoy yourself with your family and friends.
All right, same to you, thank you. All right, is Mr. Worsham, do you have any report?
No, I haven't.
All right, well, thank you.
I would make it now. It seems appropriate to make it now under reports of officers and staff.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to motion that we direct staff to draft subdivision regulations for the proposals in section, well, from Marvin Sellers.
Yeah, okay.
Is that clear enough?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All right, I'll call the vote for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Staff?
Yep, I will bring it to you at your next meeting in December.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on. New business. We're going to do 6A before 6B. The Sheeran minor subdivision. 6B before 6A. That's what I said, but I'll take that. The Sharon minor subdivision, a plat to create 2 lots from existing 20.32 acres at 463 Searbucks Road. The applicant is Mr. Brian Sharon. I'd ask him to come and speak on his project.
Yes, I have 20 acres on Sears Roebuck Road, and I'm proposing to cut 3 acres out of it with the house that is existing, and that will leave me with 17 acres left.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board for Mr. Sharon? All right, thank you. All right, with that, I believe this is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing for anyone wanting to speak on that. Anyone from the public is welcome to come and voice their comments and concerns with the Sharon minor subdivision. Limit to 2 minutes per applicant. All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Moving on to reports from officers, or from Ms. Samaniego.
Thank you, production. Yes, thank you. Here's the location map to the subject property. As the applicant stated, it is located on 463 Sears Roebuck Road, which is in the Coffee County urban growth boundary outside of the city limits of Tullahoma. Here is the survey of the property. It's a little bit hard to see. Basically, he has 20.3 acres. He's proposing to create Lot 1, which would be 3 acres with 200 feet of road frontage, and then Lot 2, the remaining 17.32 acres would have 50 feet of road frontage. The property is in the low-density residential RS1 zoning district of Coffee County in the Tullahoma urban growth boundary. The size of the lots exceed the minimum lot size of 30,000 square feet and the minimum lot width of 125 feet for the RS1 zoning district. The property is developed with a single-family residence surrounded by RS1 zoning with agricultural and single-family dwelling uses. Lot 2 is exempt from subdivision review per Tennessee Statute 133401, which says that the definition of a subdivision is all lots over 5 acres that do not require major utility construction are exempt from local subdivision regulations. So really, we're just approving Lot 1 at a 3 acre and then the remaining piece being over 5 acres. Saying that, there are several miscellaneous kind of notes and updates that needed to be added to the survey, which the applicant has agreed to. Saying that, staff recommends approval of the final plat, subject to all comments, as it meets all provisions of the subdivision regulations.
All right, thank you. Any comments from Mary? Or is it motion?
Motion to approve, subject to meeting all of the requests, miscellaneous requests that staff has required. And staff comments.
Second.
And I'm assuming you're talking about the TUA and the planning.
Right, there's like
that are in
the
the
signature box
advisory
has to be
committee.
corrected, right.
Okay.
All right, we got a motion from Mr. Berry and a second from Mr. Hall. Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion passes 6-0. All right. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is the zoning map amendments. The zoning map amendment 270 request to rezone the property at 451 Jerry Street on 216.3 acres of general agricultural to the low density residential district R1. Applicant is Henry and Beth Pasco. All right, I'd ask the applicant to please come forward.
Good afternoon, board members. Good afternoon, neighbors. Nice to see everyone here today. Thank you for this opportunity to share. And once again, my name is Henry Pasco. My wife Beth and I, we purchased the city property as a long-term investment for us and also for the community as well. I believe in win-win situations, and we are even considering moving here to Tennessee. Presently, we do not plan to develop the property in the immediate future, but we do also understand that Tullahoma is growing, and we want to provide a quality neighborhood that would actually enhance Tullahoma even more. It's a great community. We want to make it even better. And this property is located within the city limits, and this application is in accordance with the vision of the existing Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan, and it fits into the context of the surrounding zoning as well. And the goal is to develop this land into single-family homes and according to all the city requirements and land development standards. A portion of the property is already zoned R1, and I'm requesting here that the remaining portion be rezoned to simple R1 as well. At this time, I'd like to introduce my designer, Mr. Kevin Ginther, and turn the conversation over to him.
Thank you, Dr. Petsko, and thank you, Planning Commission, Chairman Schwartz, city staff, and community members for being here this evening. We appreciate the opportunity. As had been mentioned, what is it that we're asking for? We are asking for R1 residential, single family. We are not asking for commercial. We are not asking for multifamily or apartments. We are not asking for a PUD overlay. I just want to make that really clear. As mentioned, we feel this fits very well into the surrounding neighborhoods it adjoins. R1 residential is both to the north and to the west, as well as R2 and R3 residential to the south. We also believe that this very much fits in the context of the comprehensive plan in providing future residential opportunities for Tullahoma, and that we want to do that in the context of, as had been mentioned, the value that the community has now. We also have been listening. We've been listening to the community dialogue. We've been listening to concerns about this property, and I think this is really the first chance we've had to kind of speak about what we're hoping to do. But in hearing that, I know that we heard many times that there wasn't opposition to growth in Tullahoma. It was the idea was to do it in a thoughtful way, to do it in a way that respected the community and respected the surrounding context. So we've heard that, and I believe that we have provided a request for that has responded to that. I know that, I've had a lot of discussions with property owners, and they very much care about how this project will develop over time, and it is something that will take time. It's not something that'll happen overnight. It is noted that any future development that occurs will have to be done in the context of city code, city development standards, state standards. That includes any extensions of road networks, public or water sewer, stormwater, and we've evaluated the site in context with discussions with Tullahoma Utilities. They have indicated they believe that those could be extended and serve the property, but we understand that that happens at the time of development, and we, at that time, will obviously fully make sure that we comply with all those requirements. What we're seeking tonight is simply the opportunity to rezone the property to that low-density residential for future development. So with that, we are here to answer any additional questions you may have, and once again, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you. Does the board have any additional questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do. Define near. You said that you don't have any plans in the near future, but obviously with your comments, you do have plans for development. What is near?
I can't define near. I just can say that, we don't have a developer who is going to turn around and develop lots right after this is rezoned. There's still the process of finding the opportunity to develop the property. So I can't speak for the property owner and say an exact date. I can just tell you that this will take time. There is no current plan that says this is exactly what we're going to do, and we're not going to subdivide the property immediately after rezoning. There'll be a process of trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Okay, next question. May I ask, right now it's zoned agricultural, and it's my understanding it's still being used somewhat agricultural. There's still hay that's being done on the land and things like that. if you are turning it R1 but planning to continue to use it agriculturally, I think it puts the city in a precarious position as to, are we enforcing R1 restrictions, or are we kind of prohibited because of the Right to Farm Act? So if...
I think the property complies with whichever zoning, both of those zonings could apply to the property, and it would not be in jeopardy.
Land use actually would conflict with R1 zoning regulations. I know this personally right now. But yes, land use does conflict with the R1 land use. For instance, I'll give you an example. If you're zoned R1 and you plan to spray pesticides, you would be subject to R1 regulations, and and agriculturally you would not be able to. If you were going to crop farm that and you wanted to do things to prepare that land for crop farming, you would be subject to R1 regulations and not protected by agricultural lands. So
I don't believe the agricultural needs protection. I believe it's the complying with the setbacks for building, the requirements to have utilities extended for those appropriate land uses have to happen in R1, but having it used for baling hay is not going to conflict with an R1 zoning.
are you an attorney here in Tennessee?
No, I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you that, there's the agricultural use that's on that property would intend to continue, and it would not be in conflict with the city's, I don't believe it would be in conflict with the city's ordinance. And you can ask your city attorney,
It does conflict, but we're just learning that too here in the city. My concern is if you are going to continue using it agriculturally, what is the need to rezone now until you know more of what you're going to do?
we stated that clearly. We want the opportunity to develop property in the future for residential. That's what we're asking for. That's very clear. There's no hidden agenda to that.
I would encourage you to maybe hold maybe a town hall or something to get with your fellow constituents. They are not against growth, by the way, the ones, they're not
I think
anti-growth.
that's what I stated. I agree with you. We're not opposed to growth.
Let's move on and let the other Mr. Berry.
I would like to ask the city attorney to reflect on what was just said.
R1 allows agricultural uses as well, so even though it was rezoned R1, they continue the same agriculture application that they're doing right now.
Can you spray pesticides in R1?
I don't think anything in our zoning ordinance has anything to do with the spraying of pesticides in the Sunmarker.
That is wrong. Ms. Samaniego, can you spray pesticides in R1?
There's nothing that says, there's nothing in the zoning code about spraying pesticides.
We just had this discussion not a week ago.
I know, and I didn't agree with you then. There's nothing that says you can't spray pesticides in the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Any more questions for the applicant? from
The
board?
existing, Mr. Berry, to answer your question, the existing agricultural use could continue on the property. The agricultural aspects and use of the property would be exempt from zoning. There are a number of farms around the city that are either in the agricultural zoning district or the R1 zoning district that have agricultural uses that are exempt from local zoning. What the R1 district would do is when and if this property no longer had an agricultural use and wanted to do purely residential use, then the R1 development standards would kick in.
I yearly have somebody come spray pesticides on my property.
Anyway, these.
Not that kind of pesticides.
These are
I'm talking about crops.
The applicant is patiently waiting for any other questions for him for the board. So do we have any more questions for the board? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. This is a public hearing, so I will now open up the public hearing. I will request that you limit your comments to 2 minutes, and please state your name and address as you approach the bench. Thank you.
The name is John Paris, 95 Blue Sky Court here in Tullahoma. My recommendation is that you do not approve this for 3 major reasons. Number one is when he said that he thought it was consistent with the plan? What plan? He didn't mention what plan. Is it the 2011 plan? Is it the 2025 plan? We know the 2040 plan is no longer there, so what is it inconsistent with if there's no plan yet? The second thing I would like to add, and I've asked for 3 months, and I've spoken to the city attorney 3 times about it, I believe that this change is in violation of state law issued by the Honorable Brox in 1983 that has to do with spot zoning. And spot zoning is where you take a specific piece of land and rezone it that is not consistent with the land around it. And the reason why they ruled that as illegal is that it's not in the best interest of the city or the people around that, okay? I asked the city attorney 3 times to please look at that, and the last answer I got was, well, yeah, it's a law, but it's archaic, were his exact words, okay? The Second Amendment was 1791. That's an archaic law.
Right.
We could sit here and argue till there was no end about is gun rights right or not right. Just because it's an archaic law doesn't mean that the city should ignore that and ignore state law. And then the last thing is that this plan, whatever it is that he's talking about, which I have no idea what he's talking about, has not taken into account the impact to the city, the impact to taxes around it, the impact for the need for additional fire
Thank you, sir.
department,
Thank you, sir. Your
additional
time's
police
expired.
department, and schools.
Thank
So
you.
I highly recommend that you not consider this change.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that if the attorney, since his name was called, that he is able to respond.
I can respond right now. I've told this gentleman before, this particular 1982 case has been overruled by the Supreme Court. It's no longer applicable. I didn't use the word archaic. He's used that word. He chose that word, number 1. Number 2, this property immediately adjacent to R1 property on the north and the west. So it's not spot zoning, although spot zoning, as he characterized it, is no longer the law in Tennessee.
Thank you. All right. Do you have any more public comments?
Can we ask that people stick to the 2 minutes strictly, please?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. George Wilson, 408 Albemarle Drive. I have in front of me the draft plan that was originally submitted on January 25th, 2022. And I can tell you that I, as long as everyone else, is glad to hear you say that this is all going to be R1 single family as opposed to the multiple different things that were in this original plan. When this draft plan was submitted, in a response to it, Mayor Samniago told everybody that when a formal plan was submitted, that multiple other studies would be needed. A traffic study, a hydrology study, maintenance program for the greenways, architectural renderings, and phasing schedule. I don't believe any of that has been done. In the last BOMA meeting, the BOMA had to redo a project out on Ledford Mill Roads that has been waiting for 6 years. The reason that could not go forward was because of FEMA issues with floodplain requirements. Bobo Creek, which this property drains into, is one of 3 major creeks in the city. Bobo Creek, Rock Creek, and the other one is escaping my mind. The FEMA flood plan thing says, quote, any project in a floodway must be reviewed to determine if the project will increase flood heights. An engineering analysis must be conducted before a permit can be issued. According to the Tennessee Erosion and Sediment Control Handbook, construction creates approximately 10 times the sedimentation rate of agricultural land. So you're looking at something that's going to cause 10 times the erosion, 10 times the siltation of what is one of the major tributaries to the water supply for the city. It's also the creek that runs through a natural area. So the problem that we have right here is significant. You're talking about, the initial estimation was that it would take 10 to 15 years to complete this project. You're looking at 10 to 15 years of disturbance of 200 acres of land that are going to increase the siltation of Bobo Creek by at least 10 to 15%. So right now, I believe that it is premature to rezone
All right.
this
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
R1 because you need to consider all of the things that Mary Samniago said need to be
Thank
done.
you, Mr. Wilson.
And the
Your
detrimental
time has
impact
expired.
on the water supply for the city of Tullahoma.
I would ask that if her name was called, she is able to respond if she would like.
Yes, Ms. Samaniego.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I will say, I've been here 2 years, and my name is Mary Samaniego, not Samaniago. Secondly, I did state multiple times that if the project came in for planned unit development rezoning, a site plan would have to be submitted with a traffic study, drainage study, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They are not asking for a planned development rezoning. They are only asking for an R1 zoning. So with an R1 zoning, you only have to submit an application with your deed and the filing fee, and then the criteria for evaluation for rezoning is listed in the staff report. There's only 3 questions that you ask.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public?
What do you need? Elizabeth Bowling, 999 Forest Drive. I have a couple of questions about the application. It's unclear from the information which, it says if it's requesting to rezone less than the entire parcel, a legal description should be provided. Now, they did provide the legal description from the deed. However, it is not clear from that legal description which parcels they are requesting to rezone. Also, from the Coffee County Trustee's Office, which I had them check today, parcel 9.01 is still in the name of Ellen Tucker Thomas Holt. So I would think that would be a question that perhaps the Planning Commission would want to clear before it approves a rezoning request on a parcel that is not showing in the Pasco's name at the Coffee County Trustee's Office. And I'll be happy to hand this printout to anyone if they would like to see that. Also, this is a rezoning request. You don't have to approve this request. The application states a vision of the existing Tullahoma comprehensive plan and fits into the context of surrounding zoning. But as I think there's been a lot of discussion about over the past several months, and I've been told time and time again that the comprehensive plan does not change the zoning, that the rezoning still has to come through. So here you can look at that comprehensive plan and see whether or not that's something that you want to factor into consideration. However, there are still a lot of questions that you can also, as the Planning Commission, have the authority to have those answered prior to. And those are concerns about infrastructure that is not there to support that. There's the great impact, even just going to R1, that this would have on the school system, which is already full. And we all know that there's a current teacher shortage. And there's other allowable considerations for you to consider as you look at this rezoning request.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Hi, Terry Flagler, 308 Terra. I want to be very clear that I'm not against growth. As I stated before, I'm for reasonable growth, once knowing the facts and how the growth will impact our community. The Planning Commission is to protect the interests of the citizens, protect our community, and exercise due diligence before they vote. We have heard repeatedly from some elected officials that we, the City of Tullahoma, will risk getting sued if we do not grant R1. That is completely false and unfounded. That may be what some elected officials believe, but it is untrue. A city can get sued if the decision is considered arbitrary and capricious. It would not be considered arbitrary and capricious to deny R1 based on you have no studies done, they've not even been initiated yet. So some on the board may say it would be arbitrary and capricious because we've never asked that before for other rezoning proposals. So let me get this straight. Because you granted rezoning in the past without proper information, is it okay to carry on the same tradition? We need to start asking for the proper studies before rezoning is considered. A group of citizens obtained professional legal advice from someone who specializes in this area of law. They stated that rezoning should not be done until studies are completed to see if the rezoning is fiscally feasible and best for the community. What is true is if the Planning Commission passes a rezoning request to R1, then the city may be sued if you try to change or stop the building on the rezoned property. Of course, it's important to get that done first. The professional also stated that surrounding communities in Middle Tennessee that they've worked with make sure the traffic study, a school study, and environmental impact studies are done prior to rezoning. It is my understanding that none of these studies have been initiated. I ask you to ask for these studies to be completed before considering the rezoning of the Anderson Farm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Sir.
Good afternoon. Randy Brewer, 1603 East Grundy Street. My only comment is, under planning considerations, she lists 4 unimproved access points to Grundy Street. She did not point out the access to Terra Boulevard. I just wanted that on the record. I don't know why that was omitted. The property's going to develop. I think would be naive to think it's never going to. That's the only concern that I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Scott Van Velser, Fairways Boulevard. I just want to say for the people that don't come to these meetings that this is something that our community needs very badly. I'm so happy that you guys showed up here. You're going to do very well. There are thousands of people who need properties like you're going to develop. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further public comment? All right, with that, I'm closing the public hearing. I'll move on to staff report.
Thank you, Mary Samaniego, for the record. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property at 451 Jerry Street from agricultural to R1. Here is the subject property, which is listed as Coffee County Tax Map 124, parcel 00900. I will note that 2 portions of the subject property, the northern 10-acre portion and lot 57 of Terra Estates, I'm sorry, the southern 10-acre portion and lot 57 of Terra Estates on the zoning map already are in the R1 zoning district. And I pulled up the exhibit on the PowerPoint that you can see. So this part of it's not showing my cursor, but yeah, the southern triangle of the property is already zoned R1, and they actually own a lot in Terra Estates, and that's already zoned R1. The property adjoins agricultural and single-family residences within the agricultural zoning district to the east, the low-density residential R1 zoning district to the north, south, and west. The character of the immediate area is a mix of agricultural and single-family residential uses with some commercial and mobile home parks further to the far south. Approximately 1.5 acres to the north and the northwest corner of the site is located in a special flood hazard area for Bobo Creek. Again, the property is 216.3 acres. Public water and sewer is available to the property. The minimum lot size in the R1 zoning district currently is 12,000 square feet. The property does have direct access onto East Grundy Street with 4 unimproved rights-of-way and 1 access to Terra Boulevard. And the subject property meets all standards for the R1 zoning district. The Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen are currently operating under the 2011 Comprehensive Plan. That comprehensive plan, because the 2040 plan was never adopted, you're still under the 2011 Comprehensive Plan. Rural areas within that 2011 Comprehensive Plan include undeveloped portions of Tullahoma, which have moderate development limitations, along with developable land well-suited for agricultural. The land with less capacity for both development and farming may be suitable for rural development, low-density residential. Such development shall be in keeping with the level of public services and be compatible with the surrounding development. The land use map indicates future property of low-density residential. If you look at this is the 2011 comprehensive land use map. The subject property is in dark gray, and the light yellow color is all of the low-density residential land use category per the existing comprehensive plan. On page 5 of your report, you will see some goals and objectives from that plan. Goal number 2 is to provide sufficient housing opportunity to ensure locations choice for all persons, develop and maintain viable neighborhoods as a primary element of neighborhood systems. Under the housing element, increase the supply of housing for all income groups. Another objective under the housing and community development element is encourage new residential development. Objective 751110, the location and density of housing shall be a function of services availability, proximity to activity centers, utility availability, access, and natural limitations of land. Another objective under the housing element is locate low-density residential development where urban services can be provided and will not be impacted by high density or through traffic. Objective 751124, ensure sufficient lands are zoned for residential for development and encourage diversity of housing types. So those are all goals and objectives from your currently adopted 2011 plan. The Tullahoma zoning code has 3 criteria for reviewing rezonings. They're found in section 1006E in your staff report on page 5 and 6. The proposed amendment should be necessary for substantial change or changing conditions in the area and districts affected or in the city generally. The second criteria is the proposed amendment shall be consistent with the intent and purpose of this ordinance. And the third criteria is the proposed amendment shall not adversely affect any other part of the city, nor shall any indirect or direct adverse effects result from such amendment. I will go back to my presentation here, location map. This is the existing use pattern of the surrounding area. The green color are all single-family residences. Brown is agricultural uses. That kind of maroon color is forestry uses, and then industrial and commercial for some of the other. So clearly the surrounding development pattern is primarily single-family residential. Again, here is the zoning map. It is noted for the record that this property used to be zoned R1. This property, as well as the 2 properties to the direct east, as well as a number of other properties throughout the city, were zoned agricultural when there was a city-initiated large rezoning done in 2009. The future land use map. One of the criteria to review for a rezoning is 1, consistency with your adopted comprehensive plan. Per state statute, rezoning has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the existing development pattern of the surrounding area. This is the consistency matrix pulled right out of the 2011 plan. I've highlighted for you the low-density residential single-family land use category this property is located in. The shaded areas are zoning classifications which, according to the 2011 plan, were deemed to be appropriate in those land use categories. So you'll note that in all the properties that are zoned low-density residential throughout the entire city, it's appropriate to have R1 zoning as well as R2, R3, and R4. I will also note that the agricultural zoning district is blank. If it's blank, the plan says non-shaded areas represent zoning classifications that are not compatible with land use designations. So it was deemed appropriate when they adopted the 2011 plan that the agricultural zoning district is not appropriate for the low density.
May I?
No, let me finish.
I want to clarify something.
No, ma'am, let me finish.
No.
You need to let me finish my presentation, please. So the agricultural zoning district was determined not to be appropriate for the low-density residential zoning
not what was
land use
determined.
category. saying that staff is recommending to send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen based on the findings of fact for sections 1006E of the City of Tullahoma zoning ordinance. If this board chooses to vote to recommend disapproval, or rather an unfavorable recommendation, the Planning Commission would have to cite new findings of fact from those 3 criteria that are on page 5 and 6 of your staff report. Or a third option would be you could continue the public hearing to the next meeting, which is on December 19th. That concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
I have a question about the presentation. Could you go back to the previous slide where you were talking about the agricultural?
I'm sorry.
The land use compatibility slide?
Production, can you bring up my presentation again, please?
Okay, so you said that it's your contention that they found it inappropriate or unuseful. Say again what you said about the agricultural.
So this is, so the agricultural zoning district has been in the code for some time, decades and decades. And as I just stated on the record, that this property was rezoned to agricultural in 2009. This is the 2011 plan, so 2 years later, this matrix was adopted, and it shows the agricultural zoning district, and the legend of the land use designation and zoning district compatibility states, shaded areas represent compatible zoning classifications, meaning for the land use categories, what the compatible zoning designations are. Non-shaded areas are non-compatible with the land use designations.
Okay, so you went on to say that you felt that the people who created this plan did not feel that agricultural lands were appropriate. Actually, that's not what they saw and not why that is that way. Actually, the reason that they are not shaded or don't have a delineation is because your zoning regulations that you would create through your R1, R2, R3 do not apply to agricultural lands. And that was the delineation I was trying to make earlier. So you would not overshade agricultural lands with R1, R2, R3. They either are R1, R2, R3, or they aren't. And you wouldn't want lands that were being used agriculturally to be land use classified as R1 because your zoning regulations do not apply based on 6-54-126 in Tennessee Code annotated. So the reason that they left those blank is because whatever we zone them, if they're being used agricultural or if they're in the green belt, we don't have the authority to regulate them based on the state law. And so it's not that we didn't find it appropriate. In fact, you know, ag land in Tennessee, we're losing at a very fast rate. In fact, Leapers Fork, they have all of these conservations and things like that. So I felt like you went a little further and kind of made an assumption there that I don't necessarily agree with, but I would like to, you know, consider that just because agricultural lands aren't on our list and aren't shaded doesn't mean that they're not appropriate in Tullahoma for us to keep them agricultural.
Is that your question?
It wasn't really, it was just a statement.
Well, it was a question as to exactly what you meant or where you were reading that, because she made an assumption and clarified it as.
I don't believe I made an assumption. I read it verbatim that it says that the non-shaded areas represent zoning classifications that are not compatible with its land use designations.
The reason that it's not compatible is because you can't regulate it. I just want to make that.
You asked me a question.
Yes.
Sir, Mr. Schwer, she asked me a question. I'd like to answer it.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not making an assumption. The agricultural zoning district is separate from the agricultural use of the property. You and I have had discussions with this last week. Your property has an agricultural use, but it's in an R1 zoning district. There are many properties that are zoned in the R1 or the agricultural zoning district that don't have active farms on them, that are single-family residential. So they're kind of two separate issues. One is the state-regulated agricultural use of the property, and then the other one is a zoning district that they've called agricultural.
Thank you. Mr. Berry, you have a question about the presentation, or should we move on to?
I was going to be smart.
I appreciate your restraint. All right. With that, I will ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of this request.
Okay. I got a motion to approve from Mr. Hilmer.
Second.
And a second from Mr. Hall. With that, I will open up discussion amongst the board. We'll start with Mr. Comer.
Well, I think as was said by one of the participants earlier, that this is a great opportunity for Tullahoma for its future development. I think that they have shown here tonight that they're going to do that in a responsible manner. And I think that this is consistent with past rezonings that we've done. And in my opinion, we should go ahead and approve this request.
Thank you.
I mirror his statement. I believe it's needed in Tullahoma.
Any other comments?
Yes, I'll make a comment. I think that, growth is good when you can control it and make sure that your infrastructure can keep up with the growth. But I also do think that the people sitting in this room have valid concerns about the impacts that a potential development could have on their properties, and as they should be involved in that. And I, for one, am not opposed to this property being developed. However, I do think that with rezoning this, we will be locking ourselves into, if they bring us a site plan consistent with all of our subdivision regulations, we'll kind of be locked into approving that site plan, kind of like they're bringing us this, tonight, and it's almost like, since we don't really know what they're going to do, we feel like, okay, well, we should go ahead and approve it. But is that responsible? Can the road support it? Can the infrastructure support development there? Can, our schools support an increase? And with it, I think that the sheer mass of the land in itself, that it could accommodate, as far as, how many houses could go on there. I'm not sure that the city is in a financial position, not just with the roads or with the sewer or with the water or any of those things, but maybe even with the schools. Can we accommodate all of the kids that single-family homes or multi-unit dwellings would provide for, since we know that it's generally, 18 to 35-year-olds who reside in those, or, sometimes it's elderly population, but a lot of times it's first-time home buyer type homes in the, smaller lot sizes and multi-units. So I am concerned that we don't have enough information, and that the city is potentially locking ourselves into an infrastructure battle that we are not equipped or prepared for financially to deal with. And I would, at this time, just request, if they're in no hurry, like they said, and they're not planning on doing anything immediately, for us to just take the time to analyze where we're at on the infrastructure and the costs to the city in comparison to what that would mean and what we would be locked into at its widest capacity of a rezone at quarter-acre lots. I think that would be smart. Everybody talks about smart growth, doing it the right way. Can we just analyze if we can accommodate that first? And with that, I'll make a motion to postpone until we can have further study of that issue.
Mr. Chairman, you have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, so that's true. Do I have a motion to postpone? Do I hear a second? I guess.
So you can accept a motion to postpone, but I'd like everyone else to speak before we just shovel this off, and like we seem to keep doing. So I won't second that. I'll let it die. Maybe come back to it later.
Do I have a second? Hearing no second.
There's a motion on the table to approve it.
Yeah.
Louder, we couldn't hear you at all. Let me see.
All right. I got a motion for approval and a second. Ms. Almacher has made a motion to postpone. It dies for lack of second. So we'll move on to Mr. Berry for the comments.
I wanted to address some of the public comments that I heard, because last time we were here, we were accused of not listening and not paying attention to the comments that were made. So I want to know that I did hear these comments. I think one of the first things is which plan is clear. The BOMA has been explicit on this. It is the 2011 plan. When they submit their application, I'm assuming our planning director had let them know that you are under the 2011 plan, because I'm reading that in the packet here. So I think that, to Mr. Parris's comments, the plan is clear. On the spot zoning, I believe that that has been addressed, and there's a map that clearly shows. Now, if we were looking to rezone this to C3, that would be spot zoning, because that is inconsistent with everything that is around it. This is the exact same as everything around it. So spot zoning does not apply there. Kind of the third talks about we're not taking infrastructure, and this will cover several of these, not taking infrastructure into consideration. One of the reasons I would have loved to push for a PUD is because we would have had some site plans, and we would have had some control, and we would have said, before we rezone this, we want to know what you are going to build. But when we talked them out of that because of public comments, we lost that ability to do that. This is a straight Euclidean rezone, just straight up. So when you do that, they don't have to present us a plan. Now they could, and correct me if I'm wrong here, we could say, hey guys, we want a plan. And they could give us a plan that has 2 houses on it. And we could look and say, that looks great. But then they could come back later, because we don't have the authority to bind them to that, I don't believe, and change it. Is that?
That is correct. That's called contract zoning, and that's illegal.
Yeah, and so we can't do that. So for us to, at this juncture, say, hey, we want to take into consideration the impact on transportation, the impact on sewage, the impact of, we don't know if they're putting 2 houses or if they're going to max it out. I mean, we just don't know. I think that I tell you, you're not as scary as I thought you were. I kept hearing that you were this big-time New York mafia developer. But yeah, so let me finish. Let me focus back here. So I think that asking for the infrastructure piece at this point, had we done a PUD, we could have asked that. Had they done that, we could have. We can't ask that with this rezone. We've got 3 questions that we have to answer. And if we can't answer, we need to come up with a good reason for one of those 3. One of the other things that was addressed in here was about the deed. I'm looking at a warranty deed here in our packet that clearly shows all of these properties. What's here is something from the trustee's office, and it's not those are two different. Your trustee's office and your deeds office are two different entities, but I have a copy of the warranty deed in our packet here that shows all of these parcels. One of the, to the arbitrary and capricious, I do feel that if we say, we've never done it in the past, and we really, especially with all the drama that's around this, right? If we come in now and start changing the rules and say, before we grant you a rezone, well, one, we can't ask them for a plan because that's illegal, right? We just saw that there's always the potential, and anybody can sue for anything, but there is always the potential for a lawsuit. And I do agree with Randy's comment on that little sliver there in Terra being left off that list. And I think that we do need to be aware of that. I think that some of the issues brought by Mr. Sellers, I think, are great, and I hope that we tackle those issues, and it will address some of the concerns that I think that people have. With that, I think that I addressed everything that I heard, so that people know that I did at least pay attention, and those are my reasons. I have nothing else.
Thank you. Raj, you got anything? No, just, yeah, go ahead.
I would like to react to some of the comments that Ms. Amaka made earlier. I think we're losing sight of what we've been asked to do here. They have not presented a site plan to us telling us what they're going to do with the land. They have presented a request to us to rezone this property from agricultural to R1. So what the question that's before us is it best for the future of Tullahoma's growth and the surrounding area to Tullahoma, the urban growth boundaries, is it best for that future growth for this piece of property to be zoned as agricultural, or is it best for it to be zoned as R1? That's the question that's before us today, and that's it. That's the only question that's before us today. And that's how I'm going to vote, because I think that this is best for the city of Tullahoma, for that property to be zoned R1. And I have heard all the things that have been brought up relative to this 2040 plan, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't agree with. And I understand the concern of these subdivisions that are adjacent to that, and I've listened to their concerns, but to me, this is the answer to it. The developer has reacted to their concerns and is trying to do what they want to do and preserve their integrity of their subdivisions, which I totally agree with trying to do.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Comer. No, I will echo that. I definitely agree that this is good inward growth. It's close to the schools. It's sustainable, and also it's there's a lot of reaction to what the might have beens and stuff like that. And I think this is consistent, and to try to find compromise with that. So I think this is the right path forward. I don't got too much else to say with that. I think that we're addressing concerns. Yeah, go ahead.
And this is to the general people listen. I think that the right questions are being asked but I think that they just continuously are being asked at the wrong times, right? In the 2040 plan, this blew up over zoning of this, and as we continue to say, it had nothing to do with that this zoning request would come separately, and it did. And I agree that there are subdivision regulations, and I agree with there will be a time for us to sit down and address those questions. So I feel, I understand, but we're asking the right questions at the wrong times.
Yes, this is just a rezoning request. Ms. Allmacher.
So I realize that historically that may be, I like the idea of what is best for the city of Tullahoma, and they're not asking to do anything yet. I get that, and I understand that. But I also think that we have to think, what are we locking ourselves into? And at its most liberal construing, it's not just what will they do or when will they do it, but can we accommodate all the things that come with an R1 zoning in our city's infrastructure right now? Let's say they issue a subdivision plat next week, and at the very next meeting, they meet all of the requirements. quarter-acre lots. They've gone all through the gamut. There's nothing we can do to prevent them from doing it, because you're right. If they meet all the requirements, we're locked into saying yes. Can the schools next year or two accommodate? Can the roads? Is there going to be connectivity through Terra Estates? I know that's what everybody wants to know. What are we essentially? Yes, I do think that growth is important. I think that we need, affordable housing. I'm not disagreeing with any of that, but we have to make sure that we can meet the demand in our city's infrastructure, and that's literally what this council is supposed to do. So to say we're considering questions before we need to be considering them is not true at all. I feel like once you vote on this, you're locking yourself in to the most liberal construing of what R1 could be, and you're at the mercy of the developer at that point. So should we vote on an R1 change on a parcel this, if it was a 7-acre parcel, who cares? Okay, I'm just being honest with you. But it's a 200-acre parcel. If we're thinking about the number of homes, the number of people, the connectivity issues, the schools, the infrastructure, what are we locking ourselves into? And you need to think about that now, because you won't have a chance without litigation to think about it later. And that's all I'm asking. Please reconsider my motion to postpone so that we can look into those things and have a discussion with the developers and with the property owners potentially about, hey, what can we do, to make sure that the city's infrastructure is in place to support what you intend to do before we lock ourselves into having to allow you to do it. That's all. Please, motion to postpone.
Comment. So when we approve a plat, it goes through the city engineering, economic development, parks and rec, fire department administration, TUA, all of it. And they have a chance at that point to say, we can't approve this infrastructure because we don't have it. So the zoning is kind of a separate issue, and it's their responsibility at that point to say, our infrastructure's not there, we can't provide this. So at that point, we have the legal backing saying, no, we can't approve this, the infrastructure's not there. It's their responsibility in their departments to say, hey, we can't handle this. So at that time is the time to reconsider that.
State laws don't allow us to say no to students. If they're zoned for that school, you can't tell them no. So if they come and they build it, it doesn't matter what anybody says, whether we're ready for it or not. We then have to grow our schools, grow our teachers. There are laws that say, yeah, we've got to make sure they check all the boxes, that they have adequate fire safety, that there are schools that are around it, essentially. But whenever we throw that back onto that, like for instance, the Board of Education, hey, yeah, it got approved. There's a school nearby. Guess what? You got to hire more teachers. You've got, sometimes, I agree with you. They do consider those things when we get the site plan. But once we've started that ball rolling, we're so far into it. If they meet by state law all of the qualifications, we can't tell that developer no. And are we then going to be, scurrying to try to figure out how to accommodate the things that we can't then say no to? Right now, we have an opportunity, since they're not in a hurry and have said that, to take a step back and make sure that we help accommodate the growth. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, we got it.
Is it legal for us to require them to give us a site plan in order to approve their rezone?
I'm not asking for a site plan.
No, that's not legal.
It's not legal.
That's called
With-
contract zoning, and that's illegal through court cases.
And without a site plan, we don't have anything to take to all of these different committees or to take. I'm on the school liaison, so I'm in constant contact, and there's a formula that they have for students.
Right.
And that
It's just for public education, for public knowledge. The school board through the state, the formula is there's 0.25 children K through 12 for every household. So every 4 houses, there's 1 student. That could be K all the way through 12.
Yep. So I guess that was the clarification.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor to send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the rezoning of agricultural to R1. At this point, I will call a vote for that. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
I'll abstain.
All right, we have 1 abstain.
Sir, she has to state a reason for
I
abstaining.
abstain because I don't feel like I have the adequate information to make a decision, what I just asked for.
All right, motion passes 5-0-1. All right. Let me find my agenda. All right, next item on the agenda is under new business, section C, number 1, 2040 comprehensive plan recommendations from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. There's been some traction on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. At this point, I'll just turn it over to Mary to.
Yeah, thank you. I thought I don't know, Mr. Glick wasn't in the room, he just left.
He just walked out.
Okay. We're still in the hearing, ma'am? Oh, okay. So I'm just giving, there's no action required as part of this report. I'm just giving you an update as what has transpired at the Board of Mayor and Alderman level with the comprehensive plan. So the Tullahoma Community-Wide Comprehensive Development Plan was last revised in 2011 and became outdated in dealing with the current issues related to a growing community. Through reform, so can I ask you, can you guys take that outside, please? I'm trying to give a presentation, thank you. That's fine. The draft 2040 plan was recommended by the Planning Commission for adoption by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Then the Board of Mayor and Aldermen voted to send the draft plan back to the Planning Commission.
Hey, Mary, hang on. Can we get those doors closed, please? Marva, can you close it?
Can somebody close it? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Continue, Mary. I'm sorry about that.
The Board of Mayor and Aldermen voted to send the draft plan back to the Planning Commission with additional time for citizens to review the draft, attend public open hearings and a town hall meeting with the Walker Collaborative, and to make comments on the draft. So we received about 140 pages of comments from the public, again, on the draft 2040 plan. Then the board made a motion to have a special call hearing to review all of those 140 pages of comments of the plan and have a special meeting to work through those comments and make amendments to the 2040 plan that would then ultimately be a new red light version that would come back to this planning commission for ultimate concurrence/adoption. There was some discussions, some edits started happening at the October 17th, 2020 meeting, but ultimately the Board of Mayor and Aldermen made the following motion to the Planning Commission. Suspend further consideration of the Think Tullahoma 2040 plan in favor of instructing the Planning Department to revise the 2011 comprehensive plan by updating the demographics and incorporating the land use map from the 2040 draft, but striking the place type designations and definitions replaced by the current existing zoning designations, and upgrading the transportation section with the proposed street, road, and intersection improvements. This will serve as an amended 2022 Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan until the introduction of a draft 2025 updated Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan. So what that motion was saying, they want to take the current suspend consideration of the 2040 plan. However, you take the demographics section, all of the street, road, intersection, and bicycle improvements from the 2040 plan. And I think they're saying take the place type designations from the 2040 plan and make that the new land use map. And adopt that as the new 2022 plan. And then once that's adopted, then staff would continue to work on the 2040 plan for some amount of time to become, and rename it the 2025 plan with those amendments. Subsequently, at their last meeting on November 14th, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved a motion to create a Community Plan Development Committee. So the Community Plan Development Committee would be made up of 7 citizens to be appointed by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The Community Plan Development Committee would assist the Planning Department in the revisions of the 2011 Comprehensive Plan and make recommendations to the Planning Commission and the BOMA to create the amended 2022 Comprehensive Plan. Then the specifics as to the establishment, operation, tasks, reports, and recommendations are attached to this report that came out of that November 14th meeting. Ultimately, I've included in your packet, ultimately reports and recommendations, the final paragraph. The additional recommendations of the Community Plan Development Committee for changes of the amended 2022 Comprehensive Plan and later the 2025 updated Tullahoma Comprehensive Plan will be submitted to both the Tullahoma Planning Commission and the BOMA. The Planning Commission shall review the committee's recommendations and then provide a report and recommendations to the BOMA. The Planning Commission may incorporate all, some, or none of the recommendations of the committee in its report to the BOMA. The recommendations of the Planning Commission notwithstanding, the BOMA may accept all, some, or none of the Planning Commission or committee's recommendations.
All right, thank you.
So that's kind of where we are now with the plans.
Okay, so I mean, my real question is what do we do with this information? Is it just we just wait?
I will say, for the record, I wasn't consulted with this kind of approach to revising the plans, whether that's neither here nor there. I just want to say this concept wasn't coming from me. At this point, I will wait until the Board of Mayor and Aldermen create this Community Plan Development Committee. Then I will work with them to revise the 2011 plan, which we'll now call the 2022 plan, with the specific changes from the board of updating the demographics, the transportation mobility improvements, and updating the land use map. Then I'll bring that to you as soon as we get through that process. And then I guess in the next several years, we'll continue with the committee to work on making revisions to the 2040 plan, which would then be called the 2025 plan. So this is going to be drawn out a bit.
Okay. What are the? I do find it interesting that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have the authority, so to say, to just spin up a new committee with very little input from legal or the citizens, or it seems very, very hasteful to spin up a committee in less than a month.
I mean, I will say that I don't, Mr. Worsham can certainly speak to it, but I do believe the board has the authority to create committees for any actions they may see. I will also say for the record that per Tennessee Statutes 133403, the legislative body of a municipality, which in this case is the board, can initiate plan amendments. So they have the authority to kind of, the 2040 plan that you adopted went to the board meeting, and it was denied, I think, 3 times. It was denied over and over, so that's gone. So the legislative body, the board, and so I'll hand this to you, can initiate an amendment to the plan, and then that amendment can go to the Planning Commission for consideration, but ultimately, the ultimate approval of the format of the plan, because it was initiated by the legislative body, falls with that legislative body. So I think that, I don't know, I don't want to presume, Mr. Glick is not here, but I presume that's why the last sentence said that the board ultimately can consider some, none, or all of the recommendations from the committee and or the Planning Commission.
So the 2025 plan, they're not creating a new plan, they're going back again to revise the 2040 plan. That's the basis of the plan.
No.
I believe,
I'm just trying to
That doesn't say that.
understand.
it says that, it's my understanding that the 2040 plan would be amended through this committee and renamed the 2025 plan.
No, that is not said anywhere in here, nor was it said at the meeting.
My understanding is the 2011.
What is the 2025 plan then?
The 2025 plan is a new plan that you can look at the 2040 plan and, take things, there's something that you feel like is necessary, but in no way is this us renaming, and nor does it say in here an establishment operations task or reports recommendations that you're taking the 2040 plan, revising it and renaming it. The 2040 plan, and why the board did what it did, why I voted the way I voted, is because that plan was inherently flawed at its roots. And while there may be some good that can come out of it here and there, the board is not wanting to go with the way of 2040 and the ideas of, more connectivity and urbanization and, just from an overall perspective. So I don't think it is appropriate to say, we're just revising the 2040 plan, and I think that it would throw the public off. This is a new plan in its entirety. You may consult, the board that is created may consult the 2040 plan. They may consult city planning. They may consult the planning commission. They may consult, they could actually have the authority to create subcommittees, but in no way are they bound to anything in that 2040 plan. So we need to make that very clear right now.
I do not agree. I do not agree, and I watched that meeting several times. The last meeting, Mr. Glick, when he made the motion and when I approached the dais to ask for an explanation of this process, he even stated that we're not throwing out the 2040 plan. There's a lot of good information in there. They'll use that, but it needs to be revised. So he went on and on to, sir, ma'am, can you please let me speak? You keep interrupting me. Please let me speak. She said all the information, we're not going to be out the $200,000 that the city spent. We're not out all the community input. All of that is still good information. We're going to use that all, but we're going to go work through this committee over several years and revise probably substantial revisions to that data and those comments and create the new 2025 plan. So it's nowhere in my understanding at all that we're starting from scratch.
Well, nobody's ever starting from scratch because there's always an existing comprehensive plan in place. But I think it's the intent of the board, or we would have adopted the 2040 plan and made those revisions the night that we were there to do it. It's the intent of the board to create another committee. They can, if they choose, you know what? They can throw the 2040 plan in the garbage and say, we're not using it at all. Nothing in it. They can do that too, because it's a revision to the 2011 plan.
It is the intent of some on
It was the intent of the
board.
majority vote.
Yes. So I have a question on, ultimately, the BOMA approves a plan, a finished plan or not, right? Does the planning commission have to, at some point, adopt that plan before the BOMA can adopt that plan?
Not with my reading of state statute.
So BOMA can just completely do away with the planning commission?
Well, please rephrase that. The BOMA
When it
can't-
comes to the comprehensive plan, they can completely leave out the planning commission.
An amendment to the comprehensive plan initiated by the legislative body, and Mr. Worship, I handed you the state statute, please jump in. It's my reading, and I did confer with some colleagues, other planners in the state, that it has to be taken to the planning commission for consideration, and you make a motion to approve, deny, amend, but ultimately, the legislative body, being the board, can choose to accept those amendments, alter them, or ignore them.
So it has to be brought to us whether we approve or deny it. They can
Correct.
still approve it even if we deny it.
I believe so.
Now, when you say amendment, does that, does amendment?
I agree with that. One would hope, however, that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen would consider the position of the Planning Commission in evaluating that. That's the purpose of having a Planning Commission. Otherwise, we don't even need one. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen just makes all these decisions by themselves. So looking at it from a purely, legal standpoint, that is true. But from a practical standpoint, we would hope that your input and your deliberations, consideration of these things would have bearing on what the Board of Mayor and Aldermen did. I sort of disagree with Mary Samaniego about one thing. It's not a major thing, but I think what we're working on is a revision or an amendment to the 2011 plan at this time. And looking at the 2040 plan as a guide to amending the 2011 plan. That's what it looks to me like, although that's not exactly what they said either. Frankly, the motion was a little unclear and their purpose was a little unclear too, but the bottom line is going to be that we're going to be looking at the creation of a new plan, incorporating things in the 2011 plan and the 2040 plan in there. If you want to call it an amendment to 2011 or a brand new or whatever, probably is not legally important.
I think that the underlying issue, and the reason we're having difficulty grasping this is because at the BOMA level, we aren't sure what we're doing either.
That's
we
not
don't
true.
know what we're...
And inappropriate.
We don't know, we aren't sure. I'm speaking as a member. I am unsure what we are doing. I am unsure what we voted on. I am unsure what we are amending. I didn't have time to look at this CPDC committee, and I think that the Planning Commission should have been advised, and the Planning Director should have been advised, and that the Planning Commission, if this is going to be a consulting committee for both, should have some say in the direction and parameters of that committee. I don't believe that this Planning Commission has to recognize the authority of that committee or do anything that they say, but I think that it would be a good step forward for the BOMA to consult this Planning Commission and act together. But that's, I think, my biggest takeaway is I don't know that anybody is very clear on what it is we're doing.
All right, I'm not sure what actually closes this discussion, so.
Just, somebody can make a motion to adjourn at this point.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Let's hear Mr. Comer. He's been awfully quiet over there.
I have a question that really doesn't have anything to do with this discussion that we're having on the 2040 plan. But what is the status of the annual training that this board is supposed to have?
MTS is continuing to try to work on doing an online training session. If much more time passes, I'm going to have to go to Plan B, and we'll have to have a live training like we did last year.
Well,
I believe the training we did last year was in January.
That was going to be my suggestion, based on some of the things I've heard here tonight. And I know we've got a lot of new board members that have not had any training up to this point in time.
Correct.
I would suggest that we do have a live session, and somebody mentioned a while ago, asked somebody if they were a expert on the state statutes on Planning Commission. Mm-hmm. And we had a guy here 3 or 4 years ago. In fact, he was here about 2-3 years in a row.
Mm-hmm. Sam Edwards.
From up at up in Wilson County.
He's a certified planner and a land use attorney.
And I think that would really be good to have a session where we're all here together and we can ask him questions and get answers and all get on the same sheet of music. So it's my recommendation that we do that this year rather than an online thing.
Is that a motion? I'll second if it is. Do we need one?
Motion for it.
It's fine. It's fine.
No, he didn't
Okay.
adjourn it.
No, I mean, do we need a motion to make that recommendation, or is it just?
I don't think, I think you adjourned the meeting formally, but I don't think so.
No, I'm talking about Mr. Comer and the
We
training.
can just now have a discussion about it.
Okay.
There's nothing that says how you have to do the training. You just have to do 4 hours a
Okay.
year.
I know
All right.
Sam, I've been to those planning sessions before, they're always good to refresh my memory on things, and state laws do change every year.
Yep.
And so I think it'd be very good, I agree with Mr. Comer completely, because you can have a question and answer session among all the people there, including me, and I get some enlightenment from those things too. I think we ought to do that. So very
I
good.
concur. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, anyway, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn, second by Mr. Hall. All in favor?